Welcome back, everybody, to Constructive Uncoupling, the podcast devoted to amicable divorces. I'm Judy Weigel, your host, your divorce mediator, and amicable divorce expert. Why? Because that's all I do, amicable divorces. Today, we have Stacey Lisk in the studio. Stacey is very important to many of you listening. She works in the area of child custody, but it's an area that I typically don't work in, an area, though, that some of you may find yourself in, and that's dependency court. But Stacey has a broader background. Stacey is a certified mediator with the Los Angeles County Bar Civic Mediation Group. She's also with Sentinella Youth Services, and she's with Restorative Justice and Peer Mediation Programs. But today, we're going to focus more on dependency court. This is a place that helps families resolve custody and visitation disputes. Stacey also has a nonprofit called the Southern California Mediation. Stacey, say it again. Southern
California Family Mediation.
Southern California Family Mediation. And by the way, hi, Stacey.
Hi.
And this, again, helps families to try and communicate better. Stacey, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And I have a lot of questions for you because you're going to be so helpful to people listening. So, first of all, what does dependency court do? And what are the unique challenges with the families who are part of dependency court as opposed to parents who aren't affiliated with dependency court?
Okay, so my organization is independent of dependency court. We are an outside organization that provides mediation services at dependency court. And dependency court is the place where parents who have been found to have abused or neglected their children in some way, they end up at the DCFS office and they end up in dependency court.
How do they get there? How would they?
It might be a referral. Maybe they were there's a domestic violence incident at someone's home and the police were called. And now the police get to the house and they see there's children there and they feel that the children need to be protected. It could be that a parent was drinking and driving with the children in the car and they've been pulled over. And now the police have to make sure that DCFS comes and picks up the children. So then again, it's all about safety. So the dependency court is concerned about the safety of the children.
And let me just add, because it's really coming up more and more in the lexicon of conversation, it's not just driving with alcohol, but marijuana now.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's becoming a little bit too liberal. There are testing, because I go to seminars myself now for this. I want to learn whatever the current law is. So it comes up in mediations for me. Does it come up in mediations for you?
It doesn't so much for us because we're right now the part of the system that we're working with as the exit order. So that's already been gone through with DCFS and their attorneys and the judges.
Okay. So, unique aspects of working with families in dependency court that you might not see outside of dependency court, or are there no unique aspects?
Well, I mean, there are some. Our clients are in poverty, but many of them don't have much money. So they're more likely to end up in dependency court, maybe because they're... It's kind of like it's a broad thing to say, but you're more likely to have a neighbor notice that there's something wrong going on in your home if you're living in an apartment than you are living in a 4,000 square foot home, where nobody knows what's going on, right?
Yes, haven't we learned that from the Riverside couple that had all those children for many, many years until the one girl literally escaped?
Yes.
And nobody said anything. You're so right. Closer quarters will draw eyes onto the situation more, right?
Right. Plus, poverty in itself creates domestic violence and domestic violence situations. Not that isn't happening in other homes.
Right.
It's happening everywhere. It's conflict is the great equalizer. right? But unfortunately, because they're more watched, there's more police presence in their neighborhoods. Of course, there's going to be more referrals.
Right. And also, isn't financial reasons the biggest reason people get divorced? People think it's adultery. It is not. I have not found that it's adultery. I've done research. It's financial.
Yeah, the stress of not having money, the stress of having to figure out, do I work all day and night so that I can support my family, or do I be with my family? It's tough. These are decisions that all of the parents are making.
Everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's true. And so you made an interesting distinction when we were talking before we aired, and I would like you to explain that to people. So the distinction is dependency court is not part of the regular family law court system where you file for divorce or separation or parentage cases, right?
Right.
Explain further, please.
So basically, if you want to get a divorce, you go to family law courts, and their conflict in family law court can be just as high and intense as it is in dependency court. But in dependency court, what's happening is that they're finding that your conflict may be causing neglect or maybe abusive to your children. If you are alienating another parent, if you are not letting a child see that parent, and the conflict is creating distress in a child, then you are neglecting that child's well-being.
And somebody has reported you to Child Protective Services,
right?
Which is part of the Department of Children and Family Services, right? Okay, so I think that's important for people to know. So you have this structure of Department of Children and Family Services, and underneath that you have Child Protective Services and Dependency Court. You have two.
Well, Child Protective Services is the people that would get the referral and do the investigations.
Come to the house.
Yes. Talk to the children, talk to the parents, and it's the judges at dependency court that decide whether there's enough evidence to remove your children from your care and custody.
Then what happens if dependency court, the judge feels the children, at least temporarily, would be better off somewhere else? Where do they go?
They can go to a relative. If there's a relative that is able to take in a child, and I don't know what the stats are for how many go into foster care and how many go with relatives. We know the foster care system is, pretty vigorous. There's a big foster care system, but they will they're taken if they find that the child is not safe with the parent, then they will go either to a guardian, a family member, or to foster care.
Okay, now this is really important because I learned about this myself. So I opened with saying I typically don't work in this area because I work with both. I do mostly divorces, and people come in amicable. Doesn't mean you're skipping and laughing.
Right.
It merely means you can communicate with one another enough to get decisions made for settlement.
Right.
But once in a while, I will have the petitioner come in, start the divorce, and I never meet the respondent. The respondent doesn't want to participate. And there is a way of moving through it to some degree if the respondent doesn't want to participate. But here's something I experienced with a case like this. I never met the respondent. The wife was the petitioner. All of a sudden, her daughter is with her sister and brother-in-law. Somebody reported her husband and her husband to, I guess, Child Protective Services. They came and saw that there was a continuation of verbal abuse. And the child witnessed it long enough over a period of years that the determination from Child Protective Services was get the child out of the environment while we got the parents on to, I guess, not therapy. I guess they had
classes.
To go into classes. Okay, so So that did happen, and there was a sister available to do it, or the daughter would have gone to fosters.
Right.
Okay, what are the classes like? What's the education like? So now the couple has the child removed. What happens next?
So every case is different. Some parents have to take domestic violence classes. So you have domestic violence classes for the victim, and you have domestic violence classes for the perpetrator, right? Sometimes you take co-parenting classes to learn how to co-parent with the person and be able to resolve conflicts and make decisions together. Sometimes the issue is drugs. So you're doing on-demand drug testing. You're doing drug counseling. You're doing AA. And all of this stuff.
Anger management.
Anger management's a big one. Whenever you do any of this stuff, you're taking these classes you get with certified organizations, and you get pieces of paper saying that you've completed these classes, and you take those to court and you say, look, I'm doing what you told me to do. And as you're doing that and going through that system, there's decisions being made on maybe liberalizing your visit. Maybe you started off and they say, you had drugs in your system, you were driving with the kids in the car, you are now not a safe parent. So you can't have those children with you without a supervisor. So you might have to have a monitor for a while when you're seeing your children. And then you go through the classes, and as they see that you're working on it and trying, you are now liberalized to day visits. Then you go to overnight visits. And then eventually in 18 to 24 months, usually is the norm, you're working your way back into having your children be reunited with you.
Excellent. So where does the monitor come from?
So a lot of times it's a relative. If there's a relative that is safe, they have to be, oftentimes when they're in the system, they have to be live scanned. They have to be over 21. They have to speak the language that the children are speaking and everybody is speaking. And so they can use a relative. If they don't have any relatives or any support people to help them, DCFS will be the monitor. So you can go to a DCFS office and have a monitor sitting there while you're interacting with your children. Sometimes that DCFS person will go outside of the building with you. So it just depends. Sometimes that DCFS person will go and pick up the child from that one parent and bring him to the other parent. The amount of services that DCFS gives to these families and organizes for these families is really amazing.
This is so much more involved than I think anybody thinks, and it sounds beautifully organized. The message that I get with this situation when there's emotional abuse, verbal abuse, and then, God forbid, physical violence, is that even when you're married, but especially when you're filing for divorce, the parent who may be a little healthier in terms of if there's drugs or alcohol or some kind of substance abuse going on, it is incumbent upon the parent who is not attached to substance abuse to not let the child be in the environment.
Right.
I think parents don't understand how serious this is to protect your children at all costs. And the way we behave when we're living together in a marriage is one thing, but once you file for divorce, the eyes of the court, it's a whole different mirror on you and your behavior. How important is it for the parent who doesn't have anger management, kind of is more of the victim in the situation, to step up, and what do they do so that Child Protective Services isn't called upon and the child leaves, is taken away? What do they do?
Well, they have to get out of the situation. If you don't have to necessarily be directly hitting your children to end up in this system. You could just be hitting each other and having verbal and physical fights in front of your children. If you are not protecting your children from that violence, they're not being hit, but you are, and they're experiencing their own anxiety, their own trauma based on what you're experiencing. You can have your children taken away from you. So what you have to do is get out of the situation. Don't interact. If you're interacting with somebody who is violent, don't interact. Get away from them. That's why we have shelters for abused women, so that they can go to a shelter and be safe and get their children out of the situation.
Yes, and the thing I think it's important for the victim parent, if there is a victim parent, is your priority has to be your children. You can't worry about how this looks. Mm-hmm. You can't say it's not fair that I'm the one that has to leave.
Right.
Because don't you hear that a lot? It's not fair. Forget fair.
Right.
This is about emergency action, so that your child doesn't witness something untoward.
Right.
And so that your child isn't taken away from you, right?
Yes. So that your child doesn't suffer trauma as a result of your conflict.
And the dependency court is so invested in the child not having additional trauma. Explain how, this is so cool. How is dependency court physically laid out?
Well, it's a child-centered court. It was designed with children in mind. So when you go into the courtrooms, the judge is sitting on a more even level with everybody else. The waiting rooms are amazing. There's windows all over the place. You're overlooking mountains. They have tables and chairs, little tables and chairs for children to sit at. It's to make them comfortable. Every time they go into a courtroom for their court day, they get a teddy bear. Aww. And that is a whole other program that was created by a woman named Ernestine Fields, who they get a teddy bear when they walk in to hold and to help comfort them.
That's so sweet. It really makes a difference.
It makes a big difference. Yeah.
Because how young is the youngest that you've seen come?
Oh, it's everything. I mean, if you're a mother who has drugs in her system when she's giving birth, and the child has drugs in their system, the child's now they're going to do something about that situation. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. How long have you been working with dependency court?
So our organization has been mediating at the dependency court for about 5 years now.
How did you get there? How did this relationship start?
You know what? We met a woman. She was a referee at the dependency court at the time. There was a whole full-blown mediation unit there, but because of budget cuts, they had to get rid of it. And Marilyn Mordetsky, she's a commissioner now, but she was a referee at the time at the court, and she saw the need. And she was, if you are ending your time at that court and you've made your way through the system and you're now getting your children back and you don't get along with the other parent, how are you going to decide where the children are going to be on any given day? Right?
Right.
The judge can make can make the decision for you, but generally it's better if parents can make those decisions on their own, because there's not time to go over what are the work schedules, what are the pick up and drop off issues, because what's happening is we're working with people that don't have a lot of resources. So if you have a parent that lives in Inglewood and another parent that lives in Santa Clarita, and they're trying to exchange their children on a Friday, where are they going to exchange those children? How long is it going to take them to get there? These are the things that our parents are concerned about. They're worried about how are they going to how are children going to have a good, healthy relationship and access to a parent on a regular basis?
And Stacey, you even told me at one point that you may get some extreme cases where the parents hardly know each other. It was an unplanned pregnancy. Mm-hmm. They chose not abortion, but now here they are.
Right.
They have to deal with a co-parenting situation. So I want to switch into your role as a mediator now.
Okay.
How do you do it? Let's take the extreme case of these people, these two parents barely knew each other. There's that case to the case where, no, they've been married for a while, but it just ended up into a rough situation. So let's go from the starting point. They barely know each other. How do you mediate this?
It's tough. One of the things that you have to do is normalize it for them. So they don't realize that, I think we all beat ourselves up a lot, and they're not getting along with the other parent, and they're struggling to figure out how to get along with that person. But you can normalize it by letting them know that you don't even know each other. Just reminding them you didn't know each other before all this happened. Right? So what was the conversation when you found out you were pregnant? What was the conversation with the father about being pregnant? I mean, that first conversation sets the tone for the whole rest of the co-parenting relationship, right? If it doesn't go well, the dad's saying, "Are you sure it's mine? You've been sleeping around with this person. You've been sleeping around with that person. How do I know this child's mine?" There's like a defense mechanism, why don't you get an abortion? And so a lot of times what we'll hear is parents say, well, he didn't even want her. He wanted me to get an abortion. And so they're hanging their hat on that one incident where the person was totally shocked and freaking out that they're going to be a parent, and they're asking you get an abortion because that's their first reaction. Right? So it's normalizing the situation. A lot of this is helping people understand that it's normal to be in conflict. What's not normal is to resort to violence and conflict. Right? Excellent. Everybody has conflict.
Yes.
Even parents that are married. Even when you're married, you might not agree on bedtime. You might not agree on how important school is and when the homework should get done.
Medical treatment,
all of that stuff.
A religious upbringing,
exactly.
Cultural upbringing, all of it, all the day-to-day things.
Right, and so none of those things go away when you're getting divorced or when you've split up. They're still the same issues that have to be resolved.
But to the parents that kept the child, congratulations for making a giant decision like that.
Right.
Because we have all heard wonderful stories, Stacey, about when that tough decision is made. And I'm not falling on one side or the other on abortion. I'm just making a statement. That was a big decision, at least the woman had, if not both of them, to have the child. And to support that in a positive way is really important. And we know that when decisions like that have been made, the child has ended up being a great human being.
Right.
And a wonderful service to humanity. And you never know, that could be the gift you're giving the world.
Right. Exactly.
Is the best upbringing. Okay, so this is really cool. So then is it the same strategy, I guess, you would use, or is it a little nuanced if you're dealing with a couple who has been married or living together for quite a while, knows each other inside and out, or supposedly, but now you have to give them mediation services? Any different way to approach?
Well, you might ask different questions. Not so much different ways to approach. What we have to do is at the dependency court, if you're, we have a lot of restraining orders. So if there's a restraining order, you're not putting the parents in the room together, right? We always ask the parents, are you comfortable being in a room with the person? Even if they don't have a restraining order, they have to be comfortable. And oftentimes they'll say no at the beginning, and then at the end they'll be okay with it. They just, if you're not used to especially if you're not used to sticking up for yourself, that there's a lot of anxiety created in the mediation situation because now,
Stacey has to take a second to turn her phone off.
Sorry.
Because I failed to say that at the beginning. Okay, resuming, moving on.
So, so it's just, so it's not that much different. One of the most important things that we do in our mediations is listen to people. We let them vent and we let them feel heard, so that they can make decisions, because you're not going to be able to make decisions if you don't feel heard and if you haven't been able to vent some of the emotion that's been going on with all of this. So that's one of the most important things we do. It's interesting because we generally only have 5 hours to work with people. So you're helping them in that 5 hours, you're helping them vent. You're helping them kind of change their mind, because they're coming in with an idea of how this custody schedule is going to go. And it might not even make sense. They might think that they're going to be having overnights with this child, and the court has said, no, you're having monitored visits with this child. And so you're helping them grieve and change their expectations, all within a 5-hour period. so that you can get them to make a new decision.
You know, interesting, a couple things that you said, and amazing, this work that you do, I will keep saying it. So interesting that they have X number of hours to work within, but the person who's never had a voice. So in a lot of domestic violence cases, again, whether it's physical, emotional, or verbal, you know, and it doesn't necessarily have to be physical, it could be verbal and emotional only. But there quite often is a person who feels they haven't had a voice, they haven't felt comfortable speaking up, something that exists probably in other parts of their life anyway, but very important. And now this is the first opportunity with a professional involved like yourself who's going to kind of equalize the situation between both parents, but the first opportunity for the parent who doesn't feel they had a voice to speak. Yes. They have to, it takes a little bit to find their voice, so to speak, right?
Right, yes. So one of the interesting situations that happens that we see a lot is maybe a young woman who has been in a domestic violence incident or incidents, maybe sometimes for years, it takes these classes and they're learning the patterns and they're learning why and they're all of that kind of stuff. And they come in and they're filled with all of this information. And they're in this space where they don't want to be taken advantage of, but they also don't want to be, but they also want this situation to work out. So how do they protect themselves and how do they make decisions that are reasonable but also protect themselves and protect their children, you know, because they also need to make sure, you know, it's the court that makes sure that the children are safe. So if the court says you get joint custody with your child, that means that everybody's done what they were supposed to do. But that doesn't mean that both parents trust each other or feel that their children are safe with the other parent. They might not feel that way, right?
Right, and just with the standard divorce where there is no abuse in any way, people, especially if it's a woman who spent more time with the kids, you know, a little bit more of a traditional situation, just to not have the children with you for a day.
Right.
Is frightening enough, isn't it?
Yes.
You give up that control over their safety.
Yes, and here you've been with a person who maybe they work more often than they've been with the children. They don't know the homework routine. They've never cooked anything. And you're going, now I'm sending my kids to their house, and you don't even know how to cook. And so a lot of times what we have to do is we have to help parents kind of look at, is this a lifestyle issue that you're dealing with, or is it a relationship issue, or it is a child issue, right? Your relationship issues should be between the two of you. It shouldn't affect your children. A parent's lifestyle choice of maybe only having the kids take a bath every 2 days instead of every day, or homework isn't that important to that parent. Or, you know, we've had incidences where a father will say, look, I only get my kids Friday and Saturday nights. Is my child going to show up back at mom's house dirty? Yes, because I'm not going to spend my time with my kid fighting with my kid to get in the shower, right? Or doing homework because I only have 2 days with them. You know, so, and the other parents going on and on about how the children are dirty, they're not well fed, you know, all of that kind of stuff. So you have to kind of help them see that that's a lifestyle choice. To dad, maybe the homework every night, 2 hours a night, isn't as important as it is to you. In your home, you can have that schedule, but in dad's home, he's going to do it differently.
But if dad has the child on a weeknight and there's homework, dad has to do the homework, or whoever the parent is. Sometimes the women aren't great with homework.
Right.
But that parent really does have to get the homework done, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's an obligation if you're going to have your child on a school night.
Yes, because oftentimes, I mean, I know families that have gotten into the system because their children have been absent from school too many times. And now that's a indicator to the school that something's not right in the home, right? So, yes, I mean, all of that stuff is important. But at the same time, I mean, I know people that aren't even in that system who I know a mother that does her children's homework for them. And the other parent just continually complains about it, you know? But what are you going to do? You don't have any control over that situation. So you have to let people understand that there's things that you have control over and things you don't have control over. And you kind of have to, as a divorced parent, accept those issues, you know?
Or a soon-to-be single parent, or
Right.
somebody that needs to divide time, share time with the other parent.
Right.
So, Stacey, we've come to the end, but what if people are not part of the dependency court experience, therefore wouldn't meet you there and your nonprofit there? What if they want to see you individually, private mediation? Do you do those?
I do private mediation.
So let's let people know how to get in touch with you for private mediations, because this information has been so valuable. You're so good at this, and this is the hardest piece of all in any situation where we go from one home to two homes.
Right.
How do people get in touch with you?
You can get in touch with me at stacylisk@yahoo.com.
Spell it for them, please.
STACEYLISK
Again.
@yahoo.com.
Say it one more time.
stacylisk@yahoo.com.
STACEYLISK@yahoo.com.
Right.
And so your website address is?
For the nonprofit, it's SoCalFamilies.org.
SOCAL families.org. Excellent. Stacey, you have to come back.
Yes, I would love to come back.
We just scratched the surface. And you have to bring with you situations that were tough and how they worked out.
Yes.
Promise?
I promise. It's very interesting. I love talking about it. And again, I'm not part of the dependency court. We're an individual our own independent organization, but the court gives us space to be able to mediate and.
But at least you're letting people know what goes on in this branch of service in the county, which I think is really important, because people are scared. People are in situations where the home life is not as calm as it should be, and the kids are affected so easily.
And it's a great resource. And let me tell you, parents that go through these parenting classes and these domestic violence classes, they come into the mediation room and they've learned something. And that's what the whole point is, that they've learned something and now their children are safer because of it.
I love this.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. I'm so glad I got to know you. And we got to know each other through Southern California Mediation Association.
Yes.
Stacey conducts monthly study groups, which I go to, and they're amazing, content-filled, very positive. I always walk out learning more than I had when I walked in. So thank you, everybody, for listening to Constructive Uncoupling, your Amicable Divorce podcast. I'm Judy Weigel, and you can reach me with questions or topics that I would love to have from you for additional episodes. I can be reached at Judy, Judy, at constructiveuncoupling.com. Judy, Judy, at constructiveuncoupling.com. Thank you again for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.